What does football mean to you?
It takes up a hell of a lot of time. If you enjoy it, then it's something you enjoy, you can give it plenty of time. At the moment I'm working for the Football Association, and that obviously can be quite full time.
What match do you wish you could replay?
The Enfield game in 1982 when we played Barnsley at Tottenham Hotspur in front of 40,000 people, and we lost the replay in the fourth round of the F.A.Cup.
What was your best player you've ever signed?
Well, one of the best ones we had was Paul Furlong, who eventually I sold to Coventry City for 140,000, and then a couple of years later he was sold for $2.25 million to Chelsea.
How did your family support you?
My wife saw most of the games, and eventually my two children used to come along and watch as well.
What does Enfield Football Club mean to you?
It means a great deal because I was manager for nearly 19 years on and off, and obviously it was very disappointing when the original Enfield Football Club disappeared, but fortunately the new Enfield town is there, and I do come here as often as I possibly can.
How did you keep your players fit?
Well, we train twice a week and we train quite hard, and we used to go over and run over at hilly fields and places like that, but we always had regular training sessions, so you know the players were kept up to the mark.
What is your greatest match?
The greatest match we played, I think, probably winning at Wembley in 1988 when we beat Altrincham. We beat Altrincham 1-0 to win the FA Trophy.
Who had the best celebration?
The best celebration, I think probably one of the best celebrations was when we won the conference, which is now is automatic promotion to the Football League. We won that league, I think, back in about 1982, and then it was obviously a very strong league, and we were extremely pleased to have managed to beat the best non-league sides in the country.
Did you get to travel much with the club?
Yeah, we travelled all around the place because the conference was a national league, so we used to go up as far as places like Barrow and Gateshead, so we did travel a long way, very often on a Friday and sometimes very early on a Saturday morning. Was
there any racism in the club in the early years?
Not that, no, I don't think there was really. All the players got on very well together, and there certainly wasn't any racist taunts from the crowds. Everybody accepted what was going on, and no, there was no evidence of that at all.
What was your favourite formation?
4-4-2. And then we played that most of the time because largely it was successful.
Who was your top goal scorer?
Well, Nicky Ironton, who is here today, I mean, one season he scored 36, but there were in one particular season, everybody scored for the team, including the goalkeeper, who scored a penalty in a game we won 7-1 against Barrow.
When did you start playing football?
When did I start?
Yeah.
When I was very young, obviously. I don't play anymore now, but I mean, I started obviously as a young player, played for the school team, and then went to PE college and played for the PE college.
Who was the best selected player for the team?
One of the best players I ever had was a fellow called Noel Ashford, who was an extremely good player, very talented, scored a lot of goals, but could do most things with the ball.
How did you keep your players fit?
Just by regular training sessions.
What was the best celebration from one of your players?
One of the best celebrations? Well, there was a fellow called Ronnie Howes who played, and he was a midfield player, and he still lives locally in Enfield. And when we played Port Vale in the F.A.Cup in a replay, he didn't score many goals, but he scored against Port Vale when the ground was down by your school on Southbury Road, and he celebrated behind the goal. But behind the goal there was always a little dog who sat there and watched the game. And he went to pat the dog after he scored the goal, and the dog bit his hand.
Who's your most expensive signing?
The most expensive signing? I think probably the most I ever paid was probably £5,000, and that was for Andy Pape, who played in goal. And I signed him from Harrow Borough.
Who was your greatest rivals?
At that time, probably Barnsley Football Club, who were obviously close by, and we used to play them on Boxing Day, home and away, and then either home or away, and then on New Year's Day as well. Very big crowds.
Before you joined Enfield Football Club, you were a manager of Barking for a good number of years. What was your impression of Enfield Football Club from the opposing dugout?
Well, they were always regarded as being probably one of the best non-league side around, Graham. And having spent 10 years at Barking, to be asked to come to Enfield after that period of time, having just won what was then the Isthmian League Championship, was obviously a great honour.
When you came to Enfield, you brought a lot of your players with you from Barking. Yet Enfield had just won the league title. Was there any reason why you brought such an influx of players with you?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, you have your own philosophy. And if your own philosophy centres around certain players in certain positions, that's what you do. I mean, Ted Hardy was a successful manager before me, but certainly, you know, his method of playing would certainly have not been mine.
Okay. Who was the first name you put on your team sheet?
Probably at that time, in the early days, was probably somebody like Tony Jennings, who was, you know, a leader of men, worked in the London docks, was a hard man, respected by the other players, but a good leader of men.
And was he the person who you gave instructions to carry out your instructions on the pitch?
I think he would do that, whether I gave them to him or not. I mean, he was a strong character, and certainly, you know, the players responded very well to him on the pitch, and in the same way that he looked after them. I think that he was highly respected by them, and, you know, if he wanted something done, they certainly tried to carry it out.
In your time at Enfield, you won 2 conference titles, 2 FA trophies. You had the best run in the club's history to the 4th round of the F.A.Cup. Which was the best team, do you think, in your time at the club?
Probably the team in and around that time, around about the 80s, probably the side that won the conference and won the trophy and played against Barnsley. I mean, that was a superb side. And I mean, over a period of time, there were lots of good teams. And I think as time moved on, you supplemented it, you removed some, and you brought others in. And certainly the style of football that we played, I think, gave this club, or Enfield Football Club, great success.
What was your ethos in terms of playing style?
Always score one more than the opposition. I mean, I always felt that attack was the best means of defence. We went forward, we scored lots of goals. I think we were attractive to watch. And I think, you know, we established our own reputation in football in this country.
Rather than saying what was the best performance, was there any particular performance that made you especially proud of the club and the team?
I think there were lots of those. Obviously, the F.A.Cup run where we played at Barnsley and drew was a very good performance, and then a game we should have won at White Hart Lane. And only a few weeks ago at my son's wedding, I was talking to Mick McCarthy, who remembers it very clearly, and said that it spoilt his evening the night at Barnsley after we'd drawn, and he said you should have won it because you had 2 good goals disallowed. So that always sticks. And again, you know, when we played at White Hart Lane, to have 10,000 people locked out, and half the ground was not there then because they were redesigning it, was obviously a night to remember, really.
The 1980-81 Cup run, did you realise at the time what an achievement it was, or was it something you realised more so on reflection?
Yeah, I think when we were doing it, I mean, it almost became a bit of an expectation, really, that we were doing so well. And we were running through league sides quite easily, and by far and away the better side on all of those games. So, but it was a good team with good players, and certainly in terms of what we achieved that year, it will never be forgotten. And as I said, you know, when you get people like Mick McCarthy recalling that it was a further game we should have won, and that was in the 4th round of the F.A.Cup. So, you know, it was a tremendously good run.
For those 2-3 weeks or so, Enfield became the focus of the national media in a footballing sense. What was it like, your 15 minutes of fame?
I don't know. I mean, you tend to take those things in your stride, don't you? Because, I mean, success wasn't just over a small period of time here. It was over many, many years. So we were quite used to handling success. And although there was great disappointment around certain results, I mean, it was great credit to the players at that time that they did what they did, and they did it as well as they did.
But from a general public's point of view, they don't hear an awful lot about amateur non-league football until the FA.Cup comes around, and then all of a sudden the BBC, Sky, whatever, suddenly jump on the bandwagon and the players are elevated to another level. So from that point of view, no matter what other achievements you probably accomplished with the club, the FA.Cup run probably got more publicity than anything else, didn't it?
Yeah, quite possibly, because it was a high-profile competition at that time. And I mean, it did bring a great deal of good publicity to the club. But I mean, it was a competition then that was respected around the world. So it wasn't just here. I mean, it was all over the place that we'd had this tremendously good run, and people sat up and took more notice. So it was just really, really good for the club and good for the players and good for all the spectators, the supporters, that they were able to be part of it.
At the time, you got a little bit of publicity for a comment you're supposed to have made about the Barnsley team, referring to them as a bunch of camels.
Yeah, that was absolutely true. Why did I say it? I mean, I think at the time you could perhaps take advantage of the fact that we got the media coverage. We went there and there were banners and signs all over the place. Enfield will be camel fodder, but I think, as it should have been, we should have won that day. And we certainly were the better side in Barnsley, and gave an extremely good account of ourselves. So, I'm not saying that the comments which Norman Hunter, who was their manager at the time, absolutely he enjoyed them, but it certainly made nearly 30,000 people come to that game, and a further 40,000 came to the replay. So £70,000 for camel fodder is not too bad.
So it wasn't a case of like two heavyweights having a war of words beforehand to try and sell tickets. Was it meant to be a psychological thing to try and boost your team's ego? Or?
Well, I always had a great belief in the players that I had, and I always felt that we believed that more in ourselves, and I didn't particularly look at opposition then. I knew what we could do, and I think we based our philosophy on that, and largely that worked. And the success that we enjoyed, in the FA.Cup against league sides was a justification for that. I think they had more to worry about us than we did about them.
One of the other occasions when sadly we made the national headlines was the match at Ilkeston, which was postponed because of crowd trouble. What do you remember of the Ilkeston match?
Well, I remember that we were winning quite comfortably, and there were lots of supporters there dressed as Citizen Smith, all with their berets on. And it sticks out very vividly in my mind because when, I don't know, I can't remember quite what the score was at the time, when the referee decided that since they'd invaded the pitch, it was time to call it off. I do remember seeing Stevie King hiding in the back of the stand, in case they got him, whereas we just remained in the dugout and they seemed to run by us. But it was quite a terrifying experience, really, and probably one of the first and worst pitch invasions in non-league football ever, I would have thought.
Yeah. Moving on to happier times, what was the feelings you had when you led your team out of Wembley?
I don't think you can ever replace things like that. I think that you have to try and take it in your stride. You have to think, well, we deserve to be here. I mean, on both occasions, in '82 and in '88. I mean, I had already done the work prior because the trophy final followed some 3 or 4 weeks after the season finished. The work that we did in between that time satisfied me in terms of the side being well prepared, and I left them to it. They went in the changing room, and on both occasions I walked right the way around the outside, round the perimeter of the ground, and came back in just about 10-15 minutes before the kick-off and wished them luck.
But what about actually leading them out onto the pitch? Does that make you swell with
Yes,
pride?
it does. Yes, it does. I mean, you talk about butterflies and things like that, but the whole thing, really just reverberates around your body, I think. I mean, it's very hard to describe, but it's a tremendously good feeling.
Obviously, you didn't run the ship single-handedly. You had assistants like John Ford, Ian Walton-Home, and trainer Dave Jones. What sort of level of contribution did they put into the success of the club?
Well, I think they all played a valuable part. I mean, Davy Jones had been with Enfield for a long, long time, and you know they all used to call him Ginger. And I mean, the players were fearful of him when he went on the pitch, you know, because he used to make them get up when they had broken legs. But he was a character. He used to, if we had poor performances, he used to get little badges out of his pocket and give them a thing called a parachute and tell them to come down to earth because they were living in the clouds. I mean, John Ford was a fun character, really, and he used to be the one when, if I didn't feel too happy about things, he used to make them laugh and take them out on the pitch and say, "Ignore him, and we'll have a bit of fun now and roll about in the mud and what have you." But Ian Woosnam was a far more serious character who taught at Edmonton County in the area, and I was speaking to him only a few days ago. So he lives in Suffolk now, but he was a very organised, constructive coach, and he did the things I didn't like doing. So basically he looked after free kicks and corners and all that sort of stuff.
Okay. When Enfield came up against Football League teams in the F.A.Cup, do you feel that the opposing managers and the clubs gave Enfield sufficient respect?
I always remember Frank Clark saying, you know, "You're the bane of our life," because I think on one occasion I think we played them, I don't know, 2 or 3 times before we eventually beat them. And Frank said, "Well, I wish I had your team rather than mine." And you know, I think that at the time, I think a lot of those clubs took it for granted that we were going to be an easy touch. But I don't think over a number of years that turned out to be the case. I think they realised that, you know, we were a team to be reckoned with.
And as far as the public of the borough of Enfield, do you think they ever gave the club enough recognition for what they achieved for the borough and district?
I think we were well supported at that time. I think it's proved now with Enfield Town that some of those people who supported us down at Southbury Road are still here. You could always do with more people, but you can't force people to come. But certainly in terms of the bigger games, we were never short of people. I mean, games like Port Vale and things like that, you couldn't get any more people in there. So they were always full houses. And I suppose at the time that we were still, you know, averaging good crowds for the conference and other matches. So yes, I mean, those that wanted to come, I'm sure, came and enjoyed it. And as I say, many of those are still here today.
When you came to sign a player, how much thought did you put into what the player's character was like, rather than their ability on the pitch? Yeah,
I think there's research went into it. I mean, most of the players I bought, I think you mentioned earlier about the players who came from Barking. I mean, they were players that had played for me for a considerable number of years, so I knew what they were about. I think that, you know, others, Nicky Ironton, for instance, came to me after I'd worked with him at Queen's Park Rangers. So there was a background to most, and I don't think we took too many. I didn't take too many on who I didn't know a little bit about. But you wouldn't want all, you know, people who were absolutely angels. I mean, you had to have people who had a little bit of devilment as well. So you had to have the balance in the side that, you know, allowed the players to express themselves.
Being as successful as you were in the conference, did you get any opportunities to move into Football League management?
Yes, there were opportunities, most of which I took. Well, I turned them all away because I was quite happy combining Enfield with the work I was doing as deputy head at St Thomas More School.
But was there ever this feeling that perhaps you missed out on a chance to test yourself?
Quite possibly, but I've never regretted it.
Okay. Towards the end of the 1980s, the end of your time at the club, the club started going to decline. Were any particular reason you can put your finger on as to why that happened?
I think there probably were a number of reasons. I mean, I think that you know, we'd be very fortunate with Tom Unwin as chairman, that he'd supported everything that I'd tried to do, along with people like Roy Butler, who was the financial director, and Alan Diamond, who was the secretary. We worked as a team. I think it had come to the stage where you know, things were changing. The nature of the game was changing. Players were becoming more expensive. But Tom had spent a long time at the helm, and he eventually then decided that he'd hand it over to Tony Lazaru at that time, and I think that was probably at the time where it did go down, and hopefully, you know, well, that really was the end of Enfield Football Club almost. But Enfield Town has risen from the ashes.
Okay. One final question. If you can, in one sentence, how would you sum up your time at Enfield Football Club?
Magnificent.